In my previous life, my husband and I were both soldiers. We argued so fiercely, it felt like the sky was collapsing and the earth was shaking. We fought until we couldn't live together anymore, until I was determined to get a divorce no matter what. And what was the result? The day I was kidnapped by human traffickers and taken deep into the mountains, it was Ethan Cole, my husband, who single-handedly destroyed their entire hideout. Covered in blood, he held me tightly in his arms, his voice hoarse as he said, "Emily, don't be afraid." But by then, I could no longer open my eyes. Fortunately, heaven took pity on me and gave me another chance at life. The moment I opened my eyes, I saw Ethan squatting in the yard, those hands so used to gripping a gun, awkwardly buttoning my shirt. In my past life, I truly must have been blind to abandon such a handsome and devoted husband. I had believed every poisonous word my so-called best friend said, that Ethan only cared for the younger sister of his fallen comrade, that our marriage was just an arrangement made by the organization, that he never truly loved me. I believed her until Ethan's heart turned cold toward me. Looking back now, that best friend clearly wanted me out of the way so she could take my place. In this life, I swear I will treat my soldier husband well. I won't let him suffer even the slightest grievance again. When I opened my eyes, sunlight poured through the window so bright it stung my eyes. Beside me, I heard the gentle trickle of water and the rhythmic sound of fabric being scrubbed together. I sat up abruptly, my heart pounding, 10 fingers gripping the bedsheet tightly. This was the housing compound for soldiers' families, the very place Ethan and I had lived right after our wedding. I stumbled toward the window and pushed open the wooden frame. In the yard, Ethan was squatting beside the well. His army green tank top was soaked halfway through, clinging to his broad, strong back. He lowered his head, and those hands that once gripped a rifle were now clumsily scrubbing my shirt. In my previous life, I used to mock the way he washed clothes. I said he was careless, that he didn't know how to be gentle, that his face was always cold, and he never said anything sweet. Book back. Staring at Ethan's back now, tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. In this life, I will never be as foolish as before. I wiped my face, slipped on a pair of old cloth slippers, and ran outside. Hearing the noise, Ethan turned his head toward me. His brows drew together slightly, and his voice, still firm as steel, said, "You're up. Breakfast's in the pot." In my past life, I used to hate that tone. It sounded like a command, distant and perfunctory. But now, I could hear the quiet care hidden in his stiff voice. He was afraid I might be hungry. My nose stung, my chest tightened, and before I knew it, I rushed forward and hugged him from behind. Ethan froze, his hands stopping mid-motion as water dripped from his fingers into the well. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to hug him. His whole body went stiff like stone, and he even held his breath. "Ethan," I whispered against his damp back, my voice trembling, "I'm sorry." He stayed silent for a few seconds before replying quietly, "Your clothes are dirty, don't let them touch you." Still the same, he never knew how to say sweet things. But I understood now, he was worried the well water would soak my clothes. I let go, moved around to face him, crouched down, and reached for the shirt. "Let me wash it." Ethan's brows furrowed deeper. He easily lifted his hand and dodged mine. "No need, I'll do it." "I want to," I insisted, trying to grab it again, but he pressed one hand firmly on my shoulder and I couldn't move. "Emily Carter," he said, using my full name, his dark eyes deep and steady. "Don't make trouble. You'll just think I'm losing my temper again." In my previous life, I really was unreasonable. Everyone in the housing compound knew that the wife of Captain Cole was a lioness, fierce and temperamental. But now, looking at the tight line of Ethan's lips, my heart ached and softened at the same time. "I'm not making trouble," I said gently, blinking up at him on purpose. "I just wanted to help you." Ethan stared at me for a couple of seconds, his expression unreadable, before finally muttering, "What's wrong with you? Did you take the wrong medicine or something?" I was speechless. Well, I couldn't blame him. My sudden change must have made him think I'd gone mad. Just as I was about to say something to show my sincerity, the gate creaked open, and Mrs. Lee, our elderly neighbor, walked in carrying a basket of vegetables. The moment she saw the scene, her eyes lit up. "Oh my! Captain Cole is washing clothes? Emily, you finally know how to care for your husband." Her voice was so loud and teasing that it was impossible not to hear. In my previous life, I hated this kind of so-called neighborly advice about not arguing with your husband. It always felt like they were just watching a show. But now I simply smiled and nodded. That's right, I didn't understand before, but now I know how good Ethan really is to me. Mrs. Lee froze, her vegetable basket nearly slipping from her hands. Even Ethan turned to look at me, his eyes wide as if he'd just seen a ghost. Pretending not to notice, I rolled up my sleeves, reached into the basin, and picked up one of his uniforms, mimicking his motions as I began to scrub. Mrs. Lee regained her composure and gave a dry laugh. That's more like it. Every couple has their quarrels. Captain Cole is one of the best men in this compound. You know how many girls envy you? Her tone had a hidden implication. My hands paused slightly, and I looked up at her. In my past life, it was exactly these kinds of well-meaning comments that slowly drove a wedge between Ethan and me. People always said that he was popular, that I wasn't good enough for him, that if I kept causing trouble, sooner or later someone else would take advantage of it. And sure enough, Mrs. Lee's next words were, "Oh right, I heard that Wendy Harris from the Cultural Division has been transferred back, isn't she?" Before she could finish, I cut her off with a polite smile. "Mrs. Lee, isn't it almost time for your grandson to get out of school? You'd better hurry, or he'll miss his hot lunch." Her expression stiffened instantly. Without another word, she gave Ethan a quick glance and hurried out of the yard. The moment the gate closed, Ethan finally spoke. "Wendy Harris is just the younger sister of a fallen comrade. Don't read too much into it." I froze for a moment, then realized what he was referring to. In my previous life, it was because of Wendy that we'd had so many fights. My so-called best friend, Lisa Parker, had told me that Wendy was the sister of one of Ethan's comrades who had died in service, that he took care of her out of duty, but also because he had feelings for her. Now, looking at Ethan's tense jawline, I suddenly smiled. "I know," I said softly. Then, before he could react, I leaned forward and kissed him right there in broad daylight. Ethan's ears turned bright red. He jumped up, grabbed the clean clothes, and strode toward the clothesline, his movements hurried and awkward. I squatted down, laughing so hard my shoulders shook. Who knew teasing a stoic soldier like him could be this much fun? Ethan's movements became even faster. The uniform he hung fluttered wildly, as if he wanted to hide his embarrassment behind it. Propping my chin on my hand, I watched him. Sunlight filtered through the clotheslines, casting light and shadow across his tall, straight figure. Why hadn't I noticed in my past life how even the back of his neck was so handsome? "Ethan," I called suddenly. His movements paused. He didn't turn around, only answered with a low, "Yeah? What do you want for lunch?" I asked with a smile. "I'll cook for you." The shirt hanging on the line trembled slightly. Then Ethan finally turned to look at me, his brows furrowed, eyes full of disbelief. "You know how to cook?" I was speechless for a moment. In my previous life, I never lifted a finger around the house. I ate all my meals at the cafeteria. Ethan did all the laundry, and even mopping the floor was something he squeezed in whenever he had a spare moment. Yet I still had the nerve to complain that he didn't care about me, constantly comparing him to other men, saying that other husbands spoiled their wives endlessly. Thinking back now, I must have been completely out of my mind, like my brain had been kicked by a pig. "Well, if I don't know, I'll just learn," I muttered, brushing the dust off my pants and standing up. "Anyway, I'm off work today. I'll give cooking a try." Ethan frowned even harder, his lips twitching as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he only said in a low voice, "Just don't burn the stove down." I was speechless. Apparently, I'd left him with quite a bit of trauma. I was just about to argue back when the gate creaked open again. This time, it was Mrs. Vicky Brown, the wife of our neighborhood committee member. She walked in with a plate of steaming hot dumplings, smiling brightly. "Captain Cole, my husband told me to bring some dumplings over for you," she began cheerfully, but halfway through her sentence, her eyes fell on me standing by the well. The smile on her face froze instantly, and her words stuck in her throat. I couldn't help but roll my eyes inwardly. In my past life, Vicky Brown had been one of the people who talked behind my back the most, saying I wasn't worthy of Ethan, that my bad temper would ruin his career sooner or later. Judging by her current expression, she clearly hadn't expected me to be home, let alone to find Ethan and me getting along so well. "Thank you, Mrs. Brown," I said quickly, stepping forward to take the plate from her hands with a sincere smile. "You came just in time. I was about to cook lunch for Ethan." Her eyes nearly popped out of her head. She looked from me to Ethan, stammering, "Emily, are you feeling okay?" I blinked innocently. Of course. I just finally figured some things out. I didn't understand before, but from now on, I'm going to treat Ethan well. Vicky looked like she'd just swallowed a live fly. She forced out a dry laugh, snuck a glance at Ethan, and quickly made her escape. As soon as she was gone, Ethan stepped right up to me, his dark eyes fixed on my face. "What's going on with you?" "Nothing," I said, feigning innocence as I looked up at him. "I just realized that my husband is not only handsome but also kind and even does the laundry. You're honestly the best husband a woman could ever have." Ethan's ears turned red again. He took a deep breath, clearly wanting to say something, but before he could, a series of urgent knocks sounded on the gate. "Captain Cole, emergency assembly." Ethan's expression shifted instantly. He turned on his heel and strode back into the house. I hurried after him, watching as he quickly changed into his uniform and put on his cap. In just a few seconds, the gentle husband from home transformed into a sharp, commanding soldier. "You're heading out on a mission?" I asked softly. He hesitated for a moment while buttoning the last button, then replied in a low voice, "Yeah, don't wait up for me tonight." In my previous life, I used to hate that sentence the most. Every time he said, "Don't wait," I'd throw my chopsticks, yell at him, accuse him of caring only about the army and never about our family. But now, my heart only ached for him. "Be careful," I said gently, standing on my toes to adjust the brim of his cap. "I'll wait for you to come home." Ethan froze for a moment, lowering his head to look at me. His eyes softened, complicated emotions flickering within them. After a long pause, he finally murmured, "Okay," and turned to leave, his steps brisk and resolute. I stood in the doorway, watching his back disappear down the alley as the dusk settled over the compound. My chest felt tight, full of emotions I couldn't quite name. As I was thinking about how to reheat the dumplings Mrs. Brown had brought, the courtyard gate opened again. Thinking Ethan had come back, I rushed out happily, only to see Lisa Parker standing there with a fabric bag in her hand. "Emily," she said brightly, linking her arm through mine like we were still close friends. "I heard you didn't go to work today, so I came to visit." The smile on my face immediately faded. In my past life, Lisa had been the one who drove a wedge between Ethan and me, little by little, until we fell apart. And in the end, she even colluded with the traffickers who kidnapped me. She had sold me to traffickers in the mountains, and yet she still dared to show her face in front of me now. "What do you want?" I asked flatly, pulling my hand away. Lisa froze for a second, then smiled like nothing had happened. "What's with that tone? Who upset our Miss Emily today?" "No one." I turned and started toward the house. I just suddenly realized that not all old friends are truly sincere. Her smile faltered for an instant before she quickly forced it back. "Oh my, don't tell me it's Ethan again. I've told you before, a man that cold never knows how to treat a woman right. You're such a catch. Why waste yourself on someone like—" "Ethan Cole is my husband." I cut her off, my voice calm but firm. "And I don't like hearing anyone talk badly about him." Her smile stiffened completely. You're not serious, are you? A few days ago, didn't you say you wanted a divorce?" I was foolish then. I looked straight into her eyes, speaking clearly and slowly. "Now I understand. A man like Ethan Cole. There isn't a second one like him in the whole world." Lisa's eyes flickered for a moment, then she gave a forced little laugh and waved her hand casually. "Oh please, I was just joking. Don't take it seriously. Oh, by the way, did you hear? Wendy Harris from the Cultural Division came back. She and Ethan used to." "Lisa," I interrupted again with a sweet smile, "with how fast you get information, maybe you should consider working as an intelligence officer." Her smile froze completely. Just then, the gate opened again. Ethan stepped inside, dressed in his crisp military uniform, his face as stern as ever. The moment Lisa saw him, her eyes lit up. She immediately stepped forward, her voice sugary sweet. "Captain Cole, you're back. Emily was just talking about you." Ethan didn't even glance at her. He walked straight to me and pulled a paper-wrapped parcel from his pocket. "The kitchen crew just made braised pork," he said quietly. "Eat it while it's still hot." In my past life, he'd sometimes brought food back for me too, but I never cared. I always thought he was just doing it to go through the motions. Now, holding the warm paper packet in my hands, my nose stung with emotion. "Thank you," I whispered. Ethan looked slightly uncomfortable, his voice low and curt. "Eat." Standing nearby, Lisa's face shifted between pale and flushed. She gave an awkward smile. "Captain Cole treats you so well, Emily. Well then, I'll let you two talk. I should get going." Ethan gave her a brief glance and nodded once. As soon as she was gone, I leaned closer to him, smiling mischievously. "How did you know I was craving braised pork?" Ethan's ears turned red again. He turned his face away, his voice stiff. "Just a guess." I couldn't help but laugh out loud. He was such a contradiction. Hard on the outside, soft inside. The braised pork inside the paper wrapping was still steaming, the dark sauce soaking through the thin paper. I deliberately picked up a piece that was half lean, half fat, and held it up to his lips. "Here, try it." Ethan froze, his Adam's apple moving slightly as he looked away. "I already ate." "Liar," I teased, standing on my toes. "You never eat properly when you're out on duty." His eyelashes trembled faintly, and after a moment, he finally parted his lips and took the bite. Watching the tips of his ears turn an even deeper red, my heart felt as sweet as honey. How had I not realized in my past life how much fun it was to tease my soldier husband like this? "Good?" I tilted my head, smiling. Ethan let out a quiet hum of acknowledgement, then suddenly reached into his pocket and pressed something into my hand. I looked down. It was 2 small fruit candies, their wrappers wrinkled, as if he'd been carrying them around for a long time. "Sergeant Lee from the kitchen gave them to me," he said stiffly. "I don't like sweets." My nose burned again. In my past life, he'd done the same thing. He'd always claimed someone else gave him candy, saying he didn't like sweets, when in truth, he just couldn't bear to eat them himself. Back then, I had scoffed at those cheap little candies. Now, I realized they were worth more than any imported chocolate in the world. "Ethan," I said softly as I unwrapped one of the candies and popped the orange one into my mouth. The sweetness melted on my tongue almost instantly. "The performing troupe has a show tomorrow. Will you go watch it with me?" His fingers paused halfway through unbuttoning his collar. "Didn't you used to hate that sort of thing?" "Especially," he hesitated. "You couldn't stand Wendy Harris, could you?" "You're right," I said, pretending to sigh. "But I've thought it through now. She's never actually done anything to me, so why should I make myself miserable over her?" Ethan's gaze deepened, as though he was trying to figure out whether I was serious. I knew exactly what he was worried about. Just last month, I had caused a huge scene in front of the performing troupe's gate after hearing Wendy had returned. That incident had gotten him called in by the political commissar. I leaned a little closer to him. The faint scent of gunpowder on his uniform mixed with his sharp, masculine breath. "As long as you come with me," I said, smiling, "I promise I won't cause any trouble." He was silent for a long moment, then suddenly reached out and gently wiped a trace of candy from the corner of my lips. That simple action made my heart skip a beat. In my previous life, Ethan had never shown affection like that. Because I had pushed him away so many times that even the smallest act of care had become something he was afraid to show. The next morning, I tore through my wardrobe and finally found a pale yellow dress. It was the one I had bought for our wedding, specially ordered from a friend's store in New York. Yet back then, I'd called it old-fashioned and never wore it once. Now, as I stood in front of the mirror and twirled around, I had to admit, it looked beautiful. "Emily, Captain Cole is waiting for you downstairs." Mrs. Brown's voice echoed from the courtyard. I leaned out the window and saw Ethan standing under the sycamore tree, his uniform crisp and straight. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, scattering golden dots across his shoulders. A few soldiers' wives were passing by on their way to the market. They stopped to greet him, some even giggling softly. "Captain Cole looks so handsome today," one of them whispered. "He must be taking his wife to the show. I never thought I'd live to see that." I grabbed my purse and ran downstairs. Just as I arrived, I heard Ethan saying in a calm voice, "She's been behaving really well lately." Something warm prickled behind my eyes. So even when I didn't know it, he had always defended me in front of others. Ethan, I called out brightly, running up to him. In front of everyone, I deliberately looped my arm through his. Have you been waiting long? The courtyard went completely silent. Mrs. Brown's basket nearly slipped from her hands, and the other wives' eyes went wide. I couldn't blame them. After all, in my past life, I had never once acted affectionate toward Ethan in public. I'd always thought showing closeness would make me look weak. Ethan froze for a moment, but quickly composed himself and gently supported my arm. Let's go. The hall of the performing troupe was already crowded when we arrived. As soon as we sat down, I could hear the whispers around us. I didn't need to listen closely to know what they were saying, probably wondering why Captain Cole would bring his wife to a performance like this. Want a soda? Ethan asked suddenly. I shook my head, but as I did, I noticed a few young female performers in the front row sneaking glances at him. One of them, with her hair tied up in a high ponytail, deliberately dropped her program and bent down to pick it up, revealing the pale curve of her neck. I recognized her instantly. It was Wendy Harris. In my previous life, I would have lost my temper on the spot, shouting at her for being shameless. But this time, I simply squeezed Ethan's hand and smiled. I want an ice cream bar. Come with me? Ethan blinked, slightly surprised, then nodded. As we walked past Wendy, I raised my voice deliberately. Honey, I want the red bean flavor. What about you? The word honey made Ethan's steps falter, and even Wendy froze in place. Once we stepped out of the hall, Ethan spoke quietly. She's the sister of one of my fallen comrades. The organization asked me to look after her a bit more. I know, I said, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. I trust you. The sunlight fell across his face, illuminating the faint astonishment in his eyes, and in that moment I suddenly noticed how long his eyelashes were. A small shadow formed beneath his eyes. In my previous life, I'd always complained that Ethan wasn't romantic. But now, standing under the sun with him, sharing a simple ice cream, I realized this was the most romantic thing in the world. When we returned to the hall, the show had already begun. The third act was a solo dance performance by Wendy Harris. She wore a bright red dress and spun gracefully under the stage lights, so stunning that even I couldn't deny her beauty. I noticed Ethan leaning forward slightly, his gaze fixed on the stage. In the past, that sight would have filled me with bitterness, and I would have asked him sarcastically if he thought she was beautiful. But now, I understood. He was only watching because of a promise he'd made to his fallen comrade. When Wendy finished and bowed, I even joined in the applause. On the way home, Ethan suddenly asked, "You're not upset?" "Why should I be?" I asked back with a small smile. "You're my husband. I trust you." Ethan stopped walking abruptly. The setting sun stretched his shadow long across the path as he turned toward me. For the first time, he reached out and took my hand. "Emily," he said quietly, "you've changed." "Changed for better or worse?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. "For the better," he said slowly, as if he had to think over every word. I didn't know why, but my heart began to pound harder. How could I tell him that it was because I had already died once? That only then did I realize who truly loved me. I was still lost in thought when a voice called from behind. Turning around, I saw Mrs. Moore from the factory's union department running toward me, panting. "Emily, there you are. I've been looking for you," she said, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "The provincial leaders are coming to inspect tomorrow, and the director specifically asked for you to be the guide." I froze. The same thing had happened in my previous life, but back then, after arguing with Ethan, I'd pretended to be sick just to avoid it. Later, I found out it had been an incredible opportunity to make an impression. "I'll be there," I said happily. Mrs. Moore blinked, staring at me like she'd seen a ghost. "You agreed? You're not asking for leave?" "Why would I?" I smiled, looping my arm through Ethan's. "My husband says I should take work seriously." The corner of Ethan's mouth lifted ever so slightly, a smile so faint you'd miss it if you weren't looking. Mrs. Moore's eyes darted back and forth between us before she finally muttered, "Looks like the sun really did rise from the west today." Ethan stayed silent for most of the walk home. Only when we reached the gate did he finally say, "I'll take you tomorrow." Those 4 simple words warmed me from the inside out. In my past life, he had offered to walk me to work many times, but I always turned him down, afraid of gossip. Now I realized all that gossip had been planted by Lisa and her group to drive a wedge between us. I leaned my head against his shoulder. I want everyone at the factory to know that I have the best husband in the world. Ethan's breath hitched, his chest rising and falling a little faster. When we stepped inside the house, he suddenly pulled me into his arms from behind, his chin resting gently on the top of my head. "Emily," he murmured, his voice low and heavy, "don't lie to me." The tenderness and weight in his tone made my chest tighten. In that moment, I finally understood. My sudden change unsettled him because he didn't know if it was real. I turned around, cupped his face in my hands, and looked straight into his eyes. "I swear," I said softly, "I'll never disappoint you again in this life." The moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the faint redness around his eyes. This man, who had once faced gunfire without flinching, was now moved to the core by a single promise from me. He lowered his head and gently kissed my forehead. It was the first time since my rebirth that he had initiated closeness. I knew it would take time for him to completely let go of his doubts. But that was okay. This time, I had all the patience and love in the world to make up for every regret of our past life. Before dawn, I was woken by the faint sounds of movement coming from the kitchen. Still half asleep, I rubbed my eyes and quietly made my way over. I saw Ethan pouring hot water into his military thermos. On the stove were 2 aluminum lunchboxes, one filled with plain porridge, the other neatly packed with small slices of pickled radish. "Why are you up so early?" I asked, rubbing my eyes and walking over. He clearly hadn't expected me to wake up. Startled, he almost dropped the thermos. "Did I wake you? It's still early. Go back to sleep," he said softly, glancing at the clock on the wall. I shook my head and reached for the thermos. "Didn't you say you'd take me to work today? I'll have breakfast with you." His fingers tightened slightly around the handle. "It's hot," he said. Just one word, but it made my heart melt. Ethan's care always showed in small, quiet gestures like that. I obediently withdrew my hand and watched him pour in a little cool water, screw the lid tightly, then wrap the thermos with a piece of cloth he'd sewn himself before finally handing it to me. He then carefully picked up the 2 lunchboxes, also wrapped neatly in a towel, so they were warm but not scalding. I held the bundle of simple warmth in my arms, and a wave of guilt washed over me. In my previous life, there had been a rainy day when he'd walked through a storm to bring me lunch. I'd sneered that it was cold and had thrown the box straight into the trash in front of him. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, already wearing his coat and buttoning the collar. I shook my head and buried my face against his chest, rubbing lightly against him. "You're so good to me," I murmured. His body stiffened, then after a moment, he gently patted my back. "Let's go." The morning in the housing compound was peaceful, with only a few retired officers stretching or jogging. When they saw us walking side by side, their expressions were full of surprise, as though they were witnessing something extraordinary. Ethan kept his gaze straight ahead, but his hand quietly reached back to take my wrist. "The road's slippery," he said as he looked forward. I smiled, slipping my fingers between his and interlocking them tightly. "This way's safer," I teased. His ears turned pink, but he didn't pull his hand away. By the time we reached the entrance of the textile factory, many female workers had already gathered. When they saw us walking hand in hand, the chatter burst out like hot oil crackling in a pan. In the crowd, I immediately spotted Lisa Parker. She was chatting with a few coworkers, but when she saw us, her expression froze. Forcing a smile, she called out, "Captain Cole, what brings you to our factory today?" Ethan simply nodded politely in greeting, then turned to me. "I'll pick you up after your shift." "Wait," I said, tugging at his sleeve. I took the lunchbox from my bag and handed it to him. "Here's your lunch." Even the guard at the gate widened his eyes in disbelief. When Ethan accepted the box, I could see his fingertips tremble slightly. "Emily, what's wrong with you?" Lisa grabbed my arm, lowering her voice, but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Showing off how dutiful you are in front of everyone?" I shook her hand off and deliberately raised my voice. "I made lunch for my husband. Is that a problem?" The courtyard went silent. Lisa's face turned pale green with anger. Just then, Mrs. Moore from the factory hurried over. "Emily, come with me to the meeting room. The director wants to go over the reception procedures with you." All day long, I could feel the curious, gossiping stares on my back. During lunch, when I went to the cafeteria, people automatically stepped aside to make way for me. A few women who were close to Lisa whispered mockingly from the next table. "I heard Captain Cole took her to a performance last night, probably just for show. With her temper, it won't last long. Maybe she's just scared the performers will steal him away." I kept my face calm, took a serving of braised pork, and asked for extra sauce. In my previous life, Ethan had loved mixing that sauce with his rice, but I used to scold him for eating like a child, and even forbade him from doing it. When the end of shift bell rang, I saw Ethan's tall, straight figure standing at the factory gate. He'd changed out of his uniform into a dark blue worker's jacket, standing out effortlessly among the crowd of female workers. Some of them whispered, others giggled, and one even walked past him deliberately, pretending to adjust her hair. "Did you wait long?" I asked, hurrying up to him. Ethan shook his head and took the bag from my hands. "Everything go well today?" he asked. "Perfect," I said, smiling. "The leadership even praised our workshop," I said excitedly, gesturing with my hands. But then I noticed a faint bruise at the corner of Ethan's mouth. My smile faded. "What happened to your face?" He turned his head slightly. "Training accident," he said briefly. I was about to ask more when, out of nowhere, Lisa Parker appeared again. "Captain Cole," she chirped loudly. "I heard during today's drill, you were so strict you made the soldiers from 3rd Company cry. My sister's brother works there. Said you were really tough on them." Ethan's expression immediately hardened. I knew that look all too well. In my previous life, it had been the same. Every time someone bad-mouthed me, he would take all his frustration out on the training field, pushing his men even harder. "Let me put some ointment on it when we get home," I said softly, brushing my fingers against his bruise before turning toward Lisa with a pleasant smile. "My husband's known for being a strict trainer, isn't he? That's why he's chosen as an exemplary officer every single year. Don't you think so, Lisa?" Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Ethan glanced down at me, and for a moment I caught a faint smile flicker in his eyes. On our way home, I dragged him into the food store and bought half a pound of pork belly and a bunch of greens. When Ethan tried to pay, I stopped him firmly. "No, today it's my treat. I got a work bonus." The old butcher, Mr. Lee, nearly sliced his own hand in surprise. "Well, I'll be damned. The fiery Mrs. Cole is cooking now?" he teased, laughing. "Looks like the lioness has learned to climb trees." "Don't tease him, Mr. Lee," I said with a grin, handing over the money. "You'll get used to it soon enough." Ethan didn't say a word the whole way back. It wasn't until we were almost home that he suddenly reached for my hand. "Why?" he asked quietly. The setting sun cast a golden glow across his chiseled face, making the bruise stand out even more. I knew exactly what he meant, and understood the unease behind his question. After all, a wife who'd been rebellious for 3 years couldn't suddenly turn gentle without raising suspicion. "Because I've grown up," I said softly, standing on tiptoe to kiss his chin. "Because now I know who truly loves me." Ethan's throat moved slightly, then without warning he scooped me up into his arms. "Hey," I gasped, wrapping my arms around his neck. "Someone might see us." "Let them," he said simply. "A man carrying his wife, that's perfectly normal." He carried me straight into the yard and kicked the door closed behind him. I buried my face in his shoulder, laughing so hard my body shook. This quiet, serious man. Sometimes he really knew how to surprise me. That night, he was gentler than ever before, and I responded to him with everything I had. For dinner, I insisted on cooking myself. The stir-fried vegetables were a little too salty, and the braised pork was slightly burnt, but Ethan ate every single bite, down to the last drop of sauce. As I was washing the dishes, he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist, the tips of his fingers brushing through my hair. "Emily," he murmured against my ear, his voice low, "I have tomorrow off." I turned to look at him. "Where do you want to go?" He shook his head and just held me tighter, and then I understood. He didn't want to go anywhere. He just wanted to stay close to me, to make sure all of this was real. "Then let's stay home and make dumplings," I whispered, nuzzling against his cheek. "You roll the dough and I'll make the filling." Okay, he said softly, his warm breath brushing my ear and making me shiver. In that moment, I silently thanked heaven for giving me another chance, to make up for everything I'd lost, to treasure the man who had always put me first. Outside the window, someone's radio was playing a soft, romantic song. The melody floated into our little kitchen, and Ethan started humming along, offbeat, completely out of tune. But to me, it was the most beautiful sound in the world. The next morning, I woke up early on purpose. My back ached a little as I stretched and smiled to myself while heading to the co-op store to buy flour. Ethan had been insatiable last night, as if he wanted to make up for all the lost time from our previous life. I had just turned the corner of the alley when I heard Lisa Parker's shrill voice. You didn't see it, but Emily's been fawning over Captain Cole like a lapdog. She's just afraid he'll leave her. I slowed my steps and saw her standing under a locust tree, gossiping with two other women. Lisa stood under the locust tree with a few other officers' wives, cracking melon seeds as they gossiped and spat the shells onto the ground. Let's be honest, one of them said. Captain Cole definitely has someone else in his heart. Lisa leaned in closer, lowering her voice dramatically. I heard from someone in the performing troupe that lately, Wendy Harris has been going to the military hospital every single day. Guess who she's been visiting? My heart instantly turned cold. In my previous life, it had been the same. Lisa had spread rumors everywhere, saying Ethan and Wendy were having an affair, and later, she even faked photos of them together just to drive me insane. I tightened my grip on the bag of flour in my hand, then walked over with a bright smile. Up early and already gossiping, Lisa? Be careful your tongue doesn't twist right off. Her face changed color before she forced out a laugh. Oh, come on, Emily, I was just worried about you. Worried about me? I stepped closer, my smile not reaching my eyes. Or worried about when I'll divorce Ethan so your cousin in the performing troupe's accounting department can move up and take his place. The melon seed slipped through Lisa's fingers, scattering on the ground. What are you talking about? She stammered. Last year, during the Mid-Autumn Festival, I said coolly, your cousin was caught at the gate trying to deliver 2 boxes of mooncakes to Wendy Harris. Do I need to have the record book brought out? Or maybe I should ask him why he told Wendy, once Captain Cole gets divorced, you'll have your chance. The women around us gasped. Lisa's face flushed an ugly shade of red as she lunged toward me. Emily, stop making things up. I sidestepped, and she stumbled, bumping into the tree trunk behind her. Bits of bark stuck to her clothes, making her look both pitiful and ridiculous. Just then, Ethan's voice came from behind me. What's going on here? He had just returned from his morning run, his olive green tank top soaked with sweat and clinging to his solid chest. Lisa's expression shifted in an instant. Tears welled up as she cried out, Captain Cole, Emily's been making up lies about me. Ethan didn't even look at her. He walked straight up to me, took the flour bag from my hand, and asked, Why didn't you call me to go with you? I smiled, wiping the sweat from his forehead with my sleeve. I went to buy flour and figured I'd pick up some meat while I was out. I still need to make the dumplings. Hey, Lisa froze in place, her tears still clinging to her cheeks, looking utterly foolish. Only then did Ethan finally glance at her. Comrade Lisa, he said flatly, please stop spreading rumors. For your information, Wendy Harris has been visiting her sick mother at the hospital. The transportation was arranged by the organization. He turned away without another word. Around us, the wives immediately stepped back, distancing themselves from Lisa as though she carried the plague. I slipped my arm through Ethan's. Let's go. We still need to buy green onions and chives. Even after we walked away, I could still hear Lisa sputtering angrily behind us, trying to defend herself. Ethan squeezed my hand lightly. What did she say to you? Nothing important, I said, resting my head on his shoulder. He stopped walking, then suddenly pulled me behind the tree and kissed me deeply. His lips were warm and rough, tasting faintly of salt and the morning air. Urgent, fierce, and unrestrained. I barely had time to breathe before he pulled away. Emily, he said, his forehead resting against mine, if anyone bullies you, tell me. I couldn't help but laugh. Captain Cole, are you planning to abuse your power for personal reasons? Yes, he said seriously. Using it for my wife is only right. The straightforwardness in his tone made my heart burn. In my past life, how had I ever thought this man wasn't romantic? He was sweet enough to melt anyone. When we finished our shopping and returned to the compound, the place was unusually lively. Mrs. Brown was washing vegetables by the communal tap, and the moment she saw us, she rushed over. "Emily, did you hear? Lisa got officially reprimanded by the factory." I blinked. "Really?" "That's right," Mrs. Brown said excitedly. "The administration received a written complaint saying she's been spreading gossip and stirring up trouble, damaging unity. Mrs. Moore from the union came to investigate herself, and all the officers' wives gave testimony." Instinctively, I turned toward Ethan. He was crouched down, brushing dirt from the green onions, acting as if he hadn't heard a word. But the corner of his mouth curved upward ever so slightly. By noon, the first batch of dumplings had just finished steaming, when the factory loudspeaker suddenly crackled to life. "The management announces a formal disciplinary warning for worker Lisa Parker of the textile division for spreading false rumors and causing negative influence." I picked up a steaming dumpling, blew on it, and held it to Ethan's lips. "Try it. Does it taste right?" He took a bite, and hot broth dripped down his chin. I reached up to wipe it, but he caught my wrist and pressed a kiss into my palm. "Sweet," he murmured. My face flushed crimson. "That's dumpling juice, not candy." Before I could say another word, he leaned forward and kissed me, his lips still warm and soft, tasting faintly of dough and meat. The scent of freshly steamed dumplings mixed with his breath, making my head spin. Outside, the radio announcement continued to echo faintly through the compound. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, scattering golden patterns across the floor. The moment was so beautiful, it almost brought tears to my eyes. That afternoon, I was tidying up the kitchen when the gates slammed open with a loud bang. Lisa burst in, hair disheveled, face streaked with tears, and pointed a trembling finger at me. "Emily, did you report me?" Ethan immediately stepped in front of me, his tone firm. "Comrade Lisa, watch your behavior." "Captain Cole," she sobbed, mascara running down her cheeks. "Don't let that woman fool you. You know what she was like before. This act of hers, it's all a ploy." I calmly wiped my hands on a towel and stepped forward. "If you didn't want people to know, maybe you shouldn't have done it. You really thought no one would find out you stole fabric from the factory last year?" She froze as if struck by lightning. How do you know about that?" I gave her a cold smile. "Because Mrs. Zhang, the one who helped you sell it, was arrested last week." Lisa's face turned gray. Then, all at once, she dropped to her knees. "Emily, I was wrong. Please forgive me. The person you should beg isn't me." I glanced toward the gate, where Mrs. Moore from the union and a few security guards were rushing in, drawn by the commotion. "You owe an apology to the factory, and to everyone you've slandered." They escorted Lisa away as she sobbed uncontrollably. Ethan reached for my hand, his palm rough and calloused from years of holding a rifle, yet so steady and warm. I knew what he was thinking, that he feared I might lose myself in revenge, the way I once did. "Don't worry," I said softly. "I just wanted her to taste her own medicine. I'd never destroy someone's future out of spite." Ethan's gaze lingered on me for a long moment before he suddenly bent down, slung me over his shoulder, and started walking toward our room. "Ethan Cole!" I yelped, laughing as I hit his back lightly. "What are you doing in broad daylight?" "Medical checkup," he said seriously. "Just making sure my wife hasn't been possessed, because she's suddenly become so clever." I burst out laughing. "Put me down. The dumplings aren't even finished yet." He kicked the door shut behind us. "We can finish them later. There's something more important right now." By sunset, we finally got around to eating the second pot of dumplings. Ethan insisted on feeding me himself. Both our hands were slick with oil by the end, and I leaned against his chest, gazing at the night sky outside the window. One by one, the stars began to light up. I remembered seeing a sky just like this before I died in my previous life. But back then, it had only been filled with regret. Now, all those regrets had turned into warmth in the palm of my hand, and the steady beat of Ethan's heart against my ear filled every empty corner inside me. Every single day of this second life, I could feel that warmth growing stronger, bit by bit, until it filled everything I was.